Welcome to Sofla. And Sofla takes flipped learning and online learning and combines them into a wonderful recipe that makes for effective online learning for your students. And today I'm going to take you on a journey through the cycle of learning that is Sofla. So join me. We start with what I believe are the 4 essential questions that you need to ask and answer in order to be effective in any flipped learning setting. The first question is, what to move out of class and what to put into the in class and why. Next, how do we maximize comprehension and retention in the out of class work? Third, how do we maximize interaction and differentiation in the in class work? And finally, how do we build in accountability and feedback in both in class and out of class work? And through my years of teaching online flipped learning, I've developed Sofla because I believe that it addresses these 4 questions in a remarkable way. So keep these questions in mind as we go through the 8 steps of Sofla. Now notice I said 8 steps. Here we go. These are the 8 steps. So this list of steps, why 8? Well, each step has a job to do, and they link to each other in sequence. Not only that, but they're a cycle, so that we start with the pre-work and move through the cycle and start again with the pre-work. And notice, I'm sure you did, that the pre-work is a different color because it's the linchpin of the whole model. Everything depends upon the pre-work. And if you're experienced with flipped learning, you know that that's an important key to success. And we will address that. So now we're going to go through the 8 steps of Sofla. Here we are first with the pre-work. Now I use both video lessons and shared readings. This has been an issue sometimes in what is flipped learning. Does it depend upon video? Can you do flipped learning without video? Of course! However, I have found that students interact with information differently. Some students want to listen and watch, like you're doing now, and some want to shared reading, interact with the reading, comment as they go, and read along. So because students like different modes, I do both the video lesson and the shared readings. The key is that in both cases you're providing explicit instruction asynchronously. So the out-of-class piece is the asynchronous piece. That's what we're looking at with pre-work in Sofla. And I use these 3 words to describe the pre-work to make sure that you check that all of your pre-work includes these 3 characteristics: structured, interactive, and multimodal. And for the word structured, a shout out to Robert Talbert, who suggested that we add in the word structured to the out-of-class individual space in the definition, official definition of the flipped learning network for flipped learning. In addition, it needs to be interactive because being passive and watching a video explanation like you may be doing right now is not sufficient for processing material. You need to interact with what you're seeing in order to make it sink in. And the third is what I referred to earlier, multimodal. You want to get at listening and reading and writing and viewing. All of those things are the different modes that you want students to use when they interact, where they feel comfortable. The other important piece about the pre-work, when you make it interactive, you need to have targeted, embedded questions and activities. You have to think very carefully about what it is you want them to be taking away from what you are providing in the way of content. And I think this ties in with Julie Schell's retrieval practice, where she talks about the importance of not just looking and staring and memorizing, okay, structured, interactive, multimodal, but rather having the opportunity to step away for a second and see if you can retrieve it. So pop out with an embedded question. I use PlayPosit. Or in the shared textbooks with Perusal, I ask questions and they need to respond. So that's an important piece. The other reason it's important, besides interaction for retrieval practice and learning by your students, is what you obtain from this, which is data. And the data is very important because it informs your future instruction. So when you find out how they interacted with this material, you know what it is that you want to design for the next time you see them. What was more difficult for which students? What was something that everybody seemed to get? Right? This kind of data will help you as you go into the next steps of Sofla. And let's see what they are. Now, before we go into the other steps, I'd like to talk for just a second about the Google form that you filled out for this session, because I need to relate it to what you experience yourselves. And right now, you're watching a digital presentation. I prepared you for that by giving you pre-work that included 6 items, and each one was in there for a reason. So I need you to understand more deeply about how to construct pre-work so that it taps into what students need in order to prime them for your session with them live. So the first thing I gave you was a very short introduction, an outline for the pre-work tasks. What was my goal there? I wanted to, here I am, you see me, here I am, you're more connected, there's a bit of a relationship forming there, and also to help organize you for what the pre-work is going to contain. The next thing I did was ask you what your pressing issue was. It's very important to find out a student's priorities because they may not be the same as yours. When you ask someone their pressing issue, you learn a lot about why they're in your class or your training, right? And so that data will help you to find out, oh, this is what they care about. I want to build that into my lesson. Right? The next thing was an idea that you already have for offering your instruction online. And that's important for activating prior knowledge, right? Which we all know about. Right? So you want to find out, where is this person? What are they thinking of already? What do they have already? Which is great because you have a group of people and they can share with each other. And so you can crowdsource those ideas and we're already off to the races. Next was a successful experience as a learner, because it's important to wear both hats, teacher, learner. And your students can do that too, because we have a component in Sofla that enables them to take on the role of teacher. And you'll see that later. I like to have you reflect as a learner because sometimes teachers lose touch of that. So think about your own online learning. What did you find effective? How do you feel about learning online? It's always good to start with yourself whenever you're planning something that's going to affect others. Not because they're the same as you, but because you get into that mindset that makes you more careful about what you design for other people. Then I asked you, where do you live? Because it's fun. And I live in White Plains, New York, USA, and I'm curious to see where you all live. And that also helps to build a learning community and get people connected with each other. Oh, you live there, I used to live there. You want to build an online community, a professional learning community among teachers and a student learning community for your class. And that's extremely important because people don't feel as connected online, and you want to make sure they feel as connected online. And it's amazing how just where you live can start that right off. I also gave you readings. I gave you a choice though, reading 1 or reading 2. And I asked you to simply read and give me a takeaway. And that also shows me not just that you did the reading, because you have to come up with something and it has to be in the reading, but also it tells me what resonated with you about the topic, in this case, Sofla. So I hope that this sample of the Google form and the pre-work for this presentation helps to get you a little bit into the idea of how many different aspects you need to tap into when you tap into pre-work. Now we're ready to go to step 2. And step 2 is the sign-in activity. Now, the sign-in activity depends upon the circumstances that you're teaching in and the audience, who is it that you're teaching. But there are many different types of sign-in. Important to remember is that you have freedom to make any kind of sign-in. It doesn't have to be a specific question about the video lesson or the shared reading. It can go from the cognitive realm to the affective, and we're going to take a look at that. So an example, 3 weeks ago, I don't always do my own video lessons. Sometimes I pull from the greats, and Steven Pinker is definitely one of the greats in my field at any rate. And I had them watch a Pinker video, and I asked them what surprised them, puzzled them, inspired them the most. And that generated a wonderful discussion. If they hadn't watched the video, you see? So that was the pre-work from that particular night. On another night, I asked about a relationship. This was a different course, a relationship between the deficit view of students and social justice, which is a chapter in their book that they were reading by Sonia Nieto. And there we go. It's my house. Okay. Can teachers help? And I asked them, how can teachers help? But they needed to have read the chapter to understand the concepts of deficit view, social justice, and how they relate to each other, and then move to the next step. How can teachers help? So everybody, if you notice in these first 2, is putting something different. This is not a recall question. This is not a comprehension question. Okay? This is to take it to the next step, to process it. And everybody has to write something different. They know that. They're not duplicating, they're coming up with their own ideas. And they put their name, because it's a sign-in. This is how I take attendance. This is how I make sure people are in class on time. And believe me, they want to know what the sign-in is. Some of them will peek into class early. I let them come in anytime they want. They peek in early because they want to see what the sign-in is. That's fine. That's okay with me. I don't want to be punitive about any of this, okay? So sometimes I even give them a hint what it's going to be, just to make sure. However, if you look at the last 2, it's also important to recognize our students as people and what they might be doing or going through outside of class. And so as long as most of your sign-ins address the cognitive piece and the content of your course, you throw in some of these other types of questions sometimes, because it really is important that, again, they have a learning community and also that you connect with your class on a personal level. So one time I did ask the elephant in the room question: how has COVID-19 affected you personally and or professionally? And some of them answered personal things, some answered professional, and again, we had a very good discussion based on what they had posted. And then another one just last night: we're finished now. I turned in my grades. What are your plans for the summer? Heck, why not? It's the end. Let's ask that. Okay. So now you have, I think, a good idea of step 2. So let's go on to step 3. Step 3 is what I call whole group application. Now this is the dangerous step. Dangerous? Why do I call it dangerous? I call it dangerous because it's teacher-led. And when it's teacher-led, there's always a chance that you'll dominate. And that's not the intent here. Remember, you had your chance in the pre-work. You had your chance to have them watch that video lesson and read your articles or the textbook, whatever you post for them. This is for them to process. And so you're going to be stepping back, but you're leading from behind. What you're doing is structuring an activity that they need to do together collaboratively, and they can use their audio and webcam, they can use chat, they can use whiteboard, you can send them to a Google Doc, whatever it is you want to do, as long as everyone's participating. And the idea is that you are either clarifying something that in the pre-work didn't seem that clear, and so you give them an activity that will help clarify it, or you're doing some kind of an application of the idea that takes it to the next step, and they develop what they learned in the pre-work into the next phase. And this produces some product that they can see that's evidence of their joint learning. And I always end this, and in fact I also do this with the sign-in, with my famous question that all my students know, which is, what do you notice? And I like to ask that question because I want students to see patterns. I want them to not just do an activity, but step back and debrief. Why did we do it? What did we learn from it? What do I see now that I see the whole thing laid out? It usually ends up looking like some kind of a graphic organizer or something like that. It depends on what the activity is. But the group work is really an important part of this, and they're working together, and they get a chance to see that. Okay. So that's step 3. Now we're ready for step 4, which is breakouts. Now, you all know about group work. You're teachers. I'm sure you do group work. This isn't really that different. It's just that it's online. So you have to think about, how am I going to do my group work online? Well, you can do the jigsaw, where each group does something slightly different, and then when they report back, they've done something different. Or they can all be doing the same activity, and you can think about how they did it differently or in the same way. The important thing here is to build in accountability. Now, some people have said, oh, I tried breakout groups, but it doesn't work because they just chit-chat and they're off task, and when I visit the rooms, it isn't going forward. Well, first of all, you need to send the message that it's okay to chit-chat. You want them to build relationships. You want them to feel connected and want to come to class online because they'll see their buddies. So don't be so punitive about the chit-chat, all right? The other thing is to make sure that you've structured the task for the breakouts in such a way that it's very clear what they're doing and the time frame for it, so that they know that they're going to be sharing their board with the whole class, and they have this very doable but very important task to perform as a group. The other thing is you go and you visit them, and they know you're going to come and visit them, but when you visit them, it's to provide support, not to look in and spy at them. So a lot of this is the attitude and the mindset that you have that sets the tone for the mindset that they have. And if they see that you're not going to be annoyed if you come in and they're off task, they sheepishly, oh, we were just talking about how our own situation at home is, or hey, everybody needs to do that today, right? We're all going through something, and it's okay. So that's the way you structure it. And of course, the accountability with the names of the group members, who is in that room. And sometimes you might want to do individual accountability instead of the group as a whole. That's up to you. Now, as far as the groupings, it's teacher's choice. Some activities, sometimes I do random. Sometimes I'll make it heterogeneous. I'll make sure there's a strong student in the group. Sometimes I'll have a group of all strong students or all students that need more help, and I'll spend more time in that room. Okay. Sometimes I make sure that if people were absent, they're not in the same room. I make sure they're in different rooms because if they missed the previous class, that could be an issue. And any strategy. Another idea, depending on what you're teaching, is they form the group at the beginning, and that's their group. That's another way. There's no one way to do this. You, as the teacher, decide what works best for your class. So that's one option. You see it says option 1. The other option for breakouts is peer instruction. Now, I have to warn you. Warning! Peer instruction is very complicated, and it is extra work for you. However, I have discovered by being pushed to do it, and I'll tell you about that in a minute, it turns out once you get it in place, the students love it. It's one of their favorite things to do in Sofla is peer instruction. And so I encourage you to try it. Maybe not the first time, but I'd like you to try it. And that's why I've included it here. Now, this component, and I don't know which article you read, but one of the articles was written, co-authored by Carolina Rodriguez Buitrago from Bogota. And we have worked together for years on flipped learning. And she was the one who helped me and did actually most of it for the peer instruction component of my grammar course. So the way it works is that each room has a peer leader because they're not doing it in front of the whole class. Peer teaching needs to be small group. It's part of the breakout idea so that they don't get too nervous. They have a small group. That's the way I believe most effective to do it. And what I do is that each student has a tiny piece they're going to teach the rest of the class. And do I coach them ahead? Sure, if they need it. Some of them do, some of them don't. They pre-record a video. It's kind of a mini in-class flip embedded in Sofla, if you're familiar with in-class flip. So the students come in with their video recorded. They push play. They play the video and they pause it in real time, ask questions, and their little group has to answer. Then they can clarify. So the questions are answered in the chat or audio, whatever you like, but they're questions that are pre-planned as part of the video lesson. And then at the end of the peer instruction lesson, there's a quiz, also made up by the student, but if they need help, that's okay. And I usually have them just do 3 quiz questions. I use a polling app that's simple. And you download the answers, so you find out a couple of things. You find out how well the peer instructor did in teaching the material, and you also find out, because it's part of your syllabus and your course, you find out, did the students learn that material, because you need to do some repair work if that didn't happen. So that's important. And then we do peer feedback on the peer instruction. How did it go? How did you feel about it? Did you learn? And when I'm talking about peer feedback, there's a very specific model that I use for peer feedback, but that comes in when I talk about step 5. So in step 5, we have a share out. So this is also part of the breakout idea that they know there's going to be a step 5 share out, and I don't always pick everybody. So when the group comes back and this is important too, that you need to check on their progress, not call them back before they're ready, or when they've been sitting there waiting. You also want to give them warnings that you're about to have them back so that they can quickly assemble themselves and get organized. They share their whiteboard or whatever the evidence is of what they did, what the results were of their breakout. And you can have something that says, well, one person will represent you, or you'll all speak. Usually you put that in the breakout instructions. And you might have one group start, and if they all did the same thing, they can compare and contrast. What did you do differently? And you can have some groups not report out, but simply say, oh, we had one more point that we included, or something like that. If it's a jigsaw, then you really have to get around to the different groups, because each one is going to be kind of showing or sharing what they came up with for the rest. So the peer instruction and the jigsaw wouldn't necessarily be on the same lesson. You have to kind of decide how you're going to do this. Okay. Now we get to the peer feedback. So the model I use, and this is a shout out to my colleague Khalid Fethi, a veteran flipper from Berkane, Morocco, where I have been to visit him. And he and I have worked together also for years. And his model of peer feedback is amazing. Students love it. It's pretty simple. It's shack. And just by giving them that structure, there's that word structure again. You need to structure it. Don't make it overly controlled or limiting, but don't make it wide open, give feedback. You want students to feel secure giving each other feedback. And this works so well because the students say, oh, I have something to share, or I can help you, or I have a question, or I'd like to comment on something that I noticed. Comment is noticing. There's that notice again, right? So this is Khalid's model, and I use it for after the peer instruction. I use it for after the share out. I use it on the asynchronous platform for blogs, wikis, discussion forums, everything. They're all using Shack all the time, and I highly recommend it. And now we come to step 6. Now, I have to admit, because I like being honest, that sometimes when I'm running out of time, I skip step 6, because 7 and 8, you can't. You'll see in a minute. Skip. Don't skip step 6, and I'll tell you why. Because step 6 is your best investment in making sure they do the pre-work. You'll see why. It's preview and discovery. Now, this is instructor-led, and what you're doing is you're getting them ready for the pre-work. You want them to be ready. You don't just send them to the pre-work. You do preview and discovery. Now, there are different ways to do it. So one way you can do is sometimes I do a PDF of the reading that they're going to do. And I scroll and I ask them questions and kind of highlight things that they're going to be looking for. And I kind of get them thinking about the new ideas without teaching them, but piquing their curiosity. I might also, if there's a new term, introduce the new term or new concept, because it's good sometimes to preload vocabulary that's subject specific. So that is an opportunity, because then when they encounter that, either in the video lesson or in the reading, they go, oh, that's that term. So they're connected to the material ahead of time. I mean, that's a best practice, right? And also, you want to get them motivated. You want to get them interested. And so you're enthusiastic about what they're going to learn, and that helps them to be enthusiastic, and they're previewing it. They're looking. Now, a little bit of this comes into the idea of Musalam's explore, flip, apply. So if you were reminded of that when I was talking, maybe you are familiar with that model. And this isn't explore, flip, apply, but it takes a little suggestion from that model that you don't just send them to the pre-work. You do something in class first that you know is problematic and new because they haven't learned it, and you put them in that limbo stage of, wow, I think I need to learn about this so that I know what's going on with it. Yeah. And the other thing that you're doing at the same time, there's always a hidden agenda. Just like with the embedded questions, you get the data. So what you're getting here is you're getting an informal assessment of prior knowledge. Because you're finding out right then and there, some of them may already know some of this, some may not, and that's wonderful information for you and helps you differentiate much better. Okay. So, don't skip step 6. Next is step 7. See why I said you can't skip it? All right, step 7 looks like it's not even a step, just give them the assignment. But you know, everything is a step. And it's important to be clear. Instructions, when given in a live in-person class, are very different. You're online, so how are you going to do this? You don't want a million questions. What am I supposed to do for this? What? I couldn't find the assignment. What? All right, so what you do is you have it orally presented in the synchronous session. You also have it up on a little pod or wherever you put your text, and it's written out. You talk them through it. All right, that's the live version. But you also want to have the assignment appear on your e-learning platform, either under assignments or inside the module that you're going through, however you organize your platform. And you also want to have it as an announcement that goes out to remind them about the assignment. In fact, sometimes I send it twice. Once right after class for those who want to get to it and see it in the announcement and say, okay, I'm on it. And also partway through the assignment period, depending how often you see your class, I send it as a reminder. Just a reminder, a friendly reminder, this is the assignment. Now, what do you give for the assignment? Well, you've got your short-term assignments like watch this video lesson or read this activity and respond. Either I put a discussion forum there, and that's what most people use. I've switched over to shared readings, but whatever you're using. And then there's also sometimes something you want them to post on a blog that's ongoing with installments. So maybe they're putting some information on a blog, or maybe they have a really long-term assignment just for them that they're going to be doing a presentation on a certain topic. So you want to remind them to maintain their time management, because time management is huge. And in my other presentation on online pedagogy, I talk a lot about that. So this is important to keep them posting and on top of something that they need to do long term. So that's why posting instructions is more than just give them the assignment. It's a little more thoughtful in terms of their being online. And then we come to the final step. And the final step is reflection. They know they never leave the room before reflecting. And this is the final whiteboard I use, activity. And the reason I use the whiteboard and not oral share out or go and outside of the virtual classroom do it. I want them right then and there. I want to know that they stayed in class the whole time, or that at least they're there at the end. They have to write their name. And if they write something like, great class, good night, I erase it. It's gone. So they learn very quickly they have to put something substantive. And they're not writing paragraphs, they're just writing a sentence or two, but it has to be related to the lesson or can relate to, I feel better about learning online tonight because we did X, Y, Z. So it can be related to the formal schema of the way you're teaching them and not just what the content is that you're teaching them. It's up to them. It's whatever resonated. And again, the hidden agenda is you find out what resonated. So this isn't like those exit tickets that they give at the end of class when, oh, your exit ticket is this. You know, I have a different philosophy, and my philosophy is what sticks. I want to know what sticks. That's my activity, okay? And then I should tell you, going back through all the steps that we just did, anything that is produced from steps 2, the sign-in activity, which, by the way, is not a do now. I'm sure you saw that I do it differently than that. Anything that is created or posted during that entire time, whether it's in the whole class setting or the breakouts, gets posted in the online e-platform, and they know where to find it. It's under whiteboard activities or class activities, whatever. So that anything that they produce is there, and you're validating their contributions, and again, you're helping them to learn because they're revisiting this material. It's optional, and some students may not. But if they want to refer back to it, they can. I also record the sessions. So not only for students who were absent, who have to provide me with a summary and a reaction of what they would have done if they had been there, which makes them not want to miss, by the way. But students might want to go back and re-watch a certain part of the lesson to get it in their head better, right? Or if they were presenting something, they want to go and watch how it went from the point of view of the audience. So there's a lot involved here in your work after class. So every time I teach one of these virtual sessions, after the session is over and we say goodnight, I have a lot of little cleanup work to do, posting the assignment and putting up all the screenshots and or save whatever documents from their work that they did during the session. Okay. And sometimes I do checklists. When I send out the assignment, I send out in the form of a checklist, and I always say, here's what I posted on the platform, the recording, the whiteboards, I posted so-and-so's peer instruction or whatever I posted, and then the next piece is, here's your checklist of what you need to do. And then I always end with, I'm here 24/7. As you know, contact me anytime. Don't wait till you're frustrated, and certainly don't wait until the next class. And my students know that I answer emails instantaneously. I'm a little nuts that way. That's another topic. Okay. Now, I hope you enjoyed the 8 steps of Sofla and the cycle of learning of Sofla. I've enjoyed developing it, and I'm enjoying launching it in this video for you. Now, before you go, because we're not quite done, I want you to reflect. So this is your reflection. This is your step 8. I've provided a Google form for you. It's in a shared folder, which is simply fliptech-Marshall. The actual form is at that particular link, but the whole folder has the slide deck, the pre-work, and the reflection for this presentation and my other FlipTech presentation. And I hope that you will all join me on July 15th at 9 a.m. CDT, live in Zoom, where we can talk more about Sofla. If you can't, you can always contact me, email me. Like I said, I get back pretty quick, helene.marshall@liu.edu. And I leave you with this last thought. Sofla!